All right, we're going to kick things off. Thank you for joining us for our first webinar in our Outdoor Florida webinar series from the Office of Greenways and Trails. Your moderators this morning will be myself, Katie Bernier, Regional Coordinator with the Office of Greenways and Trails, and Michaela Panariello, Outdoor Recreation Specialist, also with the Office of Greenways and Trails. We're so excited to have you with us, and we're going to kick things off with a word from our director.
Hi, I'm Eric Draper, Director of the Florida Park Service. And on behalf of the Office of Greenways and Trails, welcome to our Outdoor Florida webinar series. Today we're going to be talking about regional trail systems, which is why I'm happy to be talking to you from this local park in Tallahassee, which is part of the Capital to Sea trail system. Partnerships and collaboration are really important for regional trails, which is why we're going to hear from the Space Coast Transportation Planning Organization today. They're going to give insights about the amazing practices that help create Brevard County's terrific trail system. I hope you'll join us each month for this webinar series, and thank you for supporting Greenways and Trails.
Katie, you're on mute.
Thank you. So we're not just going to hear from Sarah Crom at the Space Coast TPO, but also Eddie Galindo with the City of Titusville and Marcia Gadke with the Titusville Area Chamber of Commerce. So starting us off will be Eddie Galindo with the City of Titusville.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Thank you to Katie and the rest of the crew for coordinating this webinar series, Outdoor Florida. We're excited to be partnering on it. My name is Eddie Galindo. I'm the Senior Planner for the City of Titusville. And let me get our slideshow shared here. All right, did I do that right?
Unfortunately, we cannot see your slideshow.
Cannot see it. Let's try it again. Screen to share. How about now?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. So Titusville is a smaller city of about 48,000 people. I wanted to give everyone a little bit of context of where we are. We're, if you point at the map, find Orlando and drag your finger directly across to the coast, that's where Titusville is. We're in North Brevard County, and we're next door to Kennedy Space Center. Because Titusville's next door to Kennedy Space Center, our growth has been closely tied to the growth of the federal space program. And so if you've ever been downtown in Titusville, you've seen the monuments that we have. We've got monuments to each of the space programs, the Apollo, Gemini, Mercury, and of course the space shuttle program. And so the city's economy was heavily dependent on the federal space program, which of course was shuttered. The launch the shuttle program was shuttered in 2011, and so that left the city kind of aloft, wondering what's next. So kind of turning inwards, focusing on what if the city is not going to be completely dependent and focused on being a space town, what else does the community have as its assets to focus on and to market itself? And so we've got the Intracoastal Waterway that's very important for maritime traffic. We've got the Canaveral National Seashore, or as the locals call it, Playland Beach. That's the largest stretch of pristine, undeveloped beach on the coast. And we've got the Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge that has lots of great biotourism, ecotourism activities like the bioluminescent kayaking, where the water lights up in the summertime. And while the city was focused on these ecotourism opportunities, we became aware of the 3 regional trails that are going to be converging in Titusville. We've got the Florida Coast to Coast Trail, which is about a 250-mile trail that crosses east-west from St. Pete to Titusville and out to the shore. And the St. Johns River to Sea Loop, that's about the same distance, 250 miles, but it's a loop that goes along up through Daytona, Palm Coast, and up to St. Augustine, and then back around to Palatka, DeLand, and Sanford. And then lastly, the East Coast Greenway, which is the longest stretch of regional trail that connects from Maine to Key West. And so our Chamber of Commerce worked with a local design firm to market these trails as the convergence of trails with the Launch From Here campaign, and created this cool graphic and maps to help tourists that were going to be new to town and needed some guidance on how to get around and what amenities we had to offer here in Titusville, and help market us as a trail town. And then because marketing isn't everything, we also had to make some improvements. So we added some wayfinding signage to help new people, new visitors find their way around town, improve the downtown trail with some landscaping, green paint, and created that dedicated path protecting it from the travel lanes. The Garden Street pedestrian bridge, because the trail alignment was going to cross a major state road, the pedestrian bridge helped to alleviate the concerns of trail traffic jetting across the state road there. And then lastly, the city constructed a welcome center, but it's not just a welcome center, it's also a bike retail space that was a bike shop up until the COVID pandemic that negatively impacted their business. Unfortunately had to close. We're hoping they can open back up again in the future. And so the Chamber helped create this Community Cycle Fun Day as our trail grand opening, create some buzz and excitement once the path was completed. And then again, these are the maps that help orient people to the nearby parks and trailhead amenities. And then the city also worked on a downtown directory, letting everyone know which businesses are around and helping people find their way. So now I'm going to try and share my screen again. This should be optimized and playing, so let me know if it doesn't.
Well, the inspiration comes from a gentleman by the name of Herb Hiller, who was really Mr. Trails and probably still is. So if you want to know anything about trails in Florida, Mr. Hiller's the guy to go to. And for me, the first step was while I was a councilman, and a nice lady by the name of Laura Lee Thompson decided that this new council member needed to know something about trails. Laura Lee decided to educate me, and it worked. I had just won the mayor's race in the summer of 2008, and Pike, Florida was planning an inaugural ride of the St. Johns River to the Sea Loop Trail, and I asked if I could go on it. If I made any contribution at all, it was sheer luck. And at that point in time, Titusville was not scheduled to be on the loop itself. We get to the point where US 1 crosses State Road 3 that goes into the Space Center. And something came into my head, who knows what. I said, you guys shouldn't go down US 1, you should go down through the Space Center and see what the wildlife refuge looks like, because I knew we had photojournalists with us and we had tourist writers with us, and they were writing about what this trail was all about. Well, they went through the wildlife refuge and they absolutely loved it. So that germinated the idea of maybe Titusville could be on the loop. If we made the eastern side of the loop through the refuge and we made the western side of the loop what would have been the spur and come across our Rax River Bridge and come through the downtown, that puts Titusville on the loop.
Talk about the 3 converging trails here in Titusville, and people do not realize, they mostly hear about the Coast to Coast Trail, which is the one that's most completed at 80% complete. The other 2, they're astonished when they hear that you can go all the way up to St. Augustine eventually and all the way from Key West to Maine. They just can't even believe it. I've been looking at trail development and what that means to communities for a number of years. And it really, I've always known that that type of thing aligned nicely with all of the outdoor recreation opportunities that we had here. So I don't know that I would say there was an awakening recently, but I think seeing the city manager, city council, and the community start to embrace the concept of being a part of the trail network is where I realized that it could come true.
Well, one of the people that was really instrumental in helping this happen was our city manager, Scott Larice, because it was pretty apparent early on that this bicycle trail had to come through the downtown to make it Titusville really be a part of it. If you go on Main Street now, you'll notice Main Street is a one-way street, so that we could have enough room for both cars and bicycles. The businesses along Main Street wanted to make sure that there was not only room for cars, but there was room for parking, because they rely on their customers being able to park on Main Street. So the final solution was to make it a one-way street and put the bicycle path on one side.
So the visitors we've had at the Welcome Center range from 49 different states in America and then 33 different countries all over the world. And we've had over 12,000 visitors come into the Welcome Center since we opened up in February 2017. So it's just a great number of people from all different walks of life that we get to meet here at the Welcome Center.
We worked in conjunction with the city to create an educational safety video. What we realized is not only did we need to learn about what it was going to be like to be a trail town, the citizens and visitors of Titusville needed to know what was going to happen as we became a trail town, as we got to see more bicyclists and visitors from all over exploring the trail.
I do bike. I ride 100 miles a week. So, but you know, my commute, I do try to bike during the winter months when it's not so hot.
I'm told there's 400 cyclists here today, and I believe it. Looking at the bikes and the traffic and all the people, kind of exciting, isn't it?
Now we're doing this, and it's a good ride, great ride. Yeah, beautiful, absolutely. Yeah, it'll definitely attract more people, right? Come and do the rides, and then businesses will form around the bike trail too, right? Exactly. I think it'd be awesome.
We've always had a bicycle pedestrian segment to our TPO that's been out there actively working, actively advocating for these types of opportunities, but one agency, one little committee can't do it on their own. So it really is sort of a perfect storm of our local municipality, the state putting a priority on this, our county, and then the consumer in general seeing it as a priority. And it has taken a lot of collaborations, and will continue to take a lot of collaborations, because the funding that comes doesn't complete the trail. There's a lot of amenities and opportunities that will have to be done by the private sector.
These regional trail systems are really about collaboration, private, public, nonprofit. Everyone in the community has to come together and take ownership of it and be committed to it. And I really feel like that's something that we've done in North Brevard is, we have bi-monthly meetings where all the players from safety to planning to construction to implementation to marketing, all get together, and we're talking about building our trail network and what's the next steps and how are we going to accomplish things, and we're really collaborating and making sure that we're seeing this from a multifaceted view, not just transportation, not just bicycling, but or recreation, but from all views and all perspectives to create the best trail network we can.
I do think it's unique, and I think that there's other communities that have asked us how we're doing it and are modeling their committees after what we've done here, whether it be the Titusville Trail Committee that the city manages, or then the Brevard County companion to that, which then you get Fish and Wildlife and the Park Service and a whole different set of partners county sheriff, those kinds of things. So there is a nice layering effect that's happening, and I think there are other communities, even close communities, that are looking very seriously at how we've been able to accomplish so much so quickly.
I'll tell you, we're just excited looking forward. The loop that's going to go out onto the National Wildlife Refuge is probably going to be the crown jewel of the trail, because I mean that's a very historic but a very beautiful, serene ride if you're going to take a bicycle or walk or hike. And the fact that the entities are going to come together and allow people to, for example, cycle or hike on our wildlife refuge, where we launched astronauts into space as well. It's an incredible combination that you can't find anywhere else in the world.
We're blessed to be located where we're located, and with a little effort, I think we're going to reap great rewards from location, and lots of hard work.
Great. So that video we produced and submitted with the application for the Florida Trail. Sorry about that. For the Florida Trail Town program, and I think Katie was there when we presented this video. We were very proud of it, and so we were grateful to accept the recognition as a Florida Trail Town here in Titusville.
Thanks so much, Eddie. We're going to hold all of our questions towards the end of the presentations. But next up, we have Sarah Crom from the Space Coast TPO.
Thanks, Katie. Does everyone see my screen?
Yes.
All right. Well, I think the video, it's such a great video, and it really does summarize a lot of what, Marcia and I are going to be touching on. So today, but we'll be kind of further expanding on some of the concepts in it. And good morning. My name is Sarah Crom. I am the Senior Transportation Planner for the Space Coast Transportation Planning Organization. I'm going to be focusing kind of more on regional consistency along the North Brevard's trails. Just to give a frame of reference, once again, we are over here on the coast, the East Central Florida coast. And what is the Space Coast TPO, or rather just TPOs in general, for those that are unfamiliar? We are governed by federal and state law, that basically areas with over 500, that is supposed to say 500,000 people must have a TPO to spend federal transportation funds. We look at the big picture, assist the communication and collaboration among the different modes and municipalities. We specifically look at 1 county, 16 cities, towns, 2 airports, 1 seaport, and we're a little bit unique where we have a spaceport as well. So basically this kind of sets us up to be a good partner for helping collaborate and coordinate between different municipalities and organizations, which is exactly what we've needed to do along the Space Coast trails, or along the North Brevard trails. As we were as Eddie's video just highlighted, we do have 3 different regional trail systems: the East Coast Greenway, Coast to Coast, and St. John's River to Sea Loop. So this has involved a lot of regional coordination in order to advance those trails and being developed. And so this is federal, state, and local organizations, things such as the FDOT. They definitely help with planning, design, construction of the trails. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the National Park Service are 2 federal partners, where right now the Space Coast Trail, which is our last section of the Coast to Coast Trail that needs to be developed in order for us to be complete in Brevard, they will actually be the maintaining agencies and are right now working with FDOT to design those projects. Brevard County is another maintaining agency of much of the trail in the north part of North Brevard. the city of Titusville is another great partner. They maintain trails in their city. Titusville Chamber, the video highlighted a lot of awesome, great things they've been doing. So it really is just a partnership. This is just a tip of the iceberg of everyone who has been involved with the regional coordination in our area for the North Brevard Trails. So something that we developed, and it was mentioned in the video, is we started kind of a leadership group, and it was based on the statewide coast to coast leadership group for those that may have been involved with the 2 regional planning councils who are working towards consensus on certain subjects, such as the logo and development of a web page and such along coast to coast. And basically, we were sitting in a meeting one day, and someone said, why aren't we doing this as just a county? There's so much collaboration that really needs to be happening along these regional trails. And so basically, it made sense, as I said, just explaining who a TPO is, that we would kind of take the lead because we're kind of set up for that regional coordination. And we've brought together 15 different municipality departments, maintaining agencies and organizations. And we were holding bi-monthly meetings prior to COVID. And we've now kind of switched to holding some project meetings instead, but we do plan to get back to the bi-monthly meetings and hopefully 2022. And this also complemented the city's trail meetings. So they were holding I believe it was bi-monthly or quarterly as well. That was just interdepartmental. Myself and the chamber, Marcia, who will speak in a little bit, and so and anyone else that needed to come in, and so it really complemented their meetings, and we were able to really start seeing the trails as not just, this is the county's trail, this is the trail being designed for Marietta National Wildlife Refuge, but really the network and how it all works together and how to work towards a better trail experience by working together. So we have basically, the purpose was to discuss the big picture and have the regional coordination in view. So some wins and current initiatives, networking, obviously, everyone got to know each other. We got to meet other people in different departments that we might not necessarily have the opportunity to talk to and see. Networking. So we held the St. Johns River to Sea Loop. We hosted the St. Johns River to Sea Loop Summit webinar series last year. Some of you might have attended. Originally, we were supposed to host the summit in Titusville, and we, just like everyone else, had to do a 180 and figure out how the world worked in quarantine. And so we held a series of webinars, including Dan Burden was our keynote speaker. And so it was a great opportunity for finding a way to connect with our trail partners, even when we were all locked inside our homes. We coordinated the development of a safety brochure. The county received a federal lands access program grant, really, from the partnerships. And our current initiative is the North Brevard Trails Wayfinding and Amenities Plan. So to further elaborate on the federal lands access program grant, which is focused on the Parish Park Trailhead, it's located right here along the causeway. And it was a $2.25 million FLAP grant, which is, as I said, the federal lands access program grant. And the purpose of these grants is to improve the access to federal lands. It can't be used on federal lands, but it must actually improve the access. And so this grant was able to, or it will be, it's currently still in design, finishing up design, and will be going into construction. It will be able to help improve the access to federal lands through providing trailhead facilities, as well as also access to the waterways along that causeway. And so it was $2.25 million for the federal lands access program grant, and then an additional $800 of federal transportation funds were put on it as well this past year. And so, as mentioned, it'll improve boat launches, there'll be parking, there's some stormwater improvements, and so it'll really help elevate this area and really get it ready for continuing that connection of the Coast to Coast Trail into the Marietta National Wildlife Refuge. Our biggest project right now, I think, as a collaboration group, is the North Brevard Trails Wayfinding and Amenities Plan. It is funded and managed by the Space Coast TPO. We are doing it with with the help of consultants from Tyndall Oliver and AECOM. It began in March 2021 and is scheduled to be complete this December. It's being immediately, and this is one of the really exciting things, is a lot of times as a planner, we develop these plans and these big ideas and put all this work and funds into a plan that then just kind of sits on a shelf. And this one isn't sitting on a shelf. It's already being immediately incorporated. We're having discussions and emails and working through basically trying to finish the plan while also incorporating it into the mile markers along the Space Coast Trail section of that's being developed on the Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge right now. So it's really awesome to see the plan not even be done and already going to include elements in a project. So the purpose of this plan is to develop a cohesive character for the wayfinding amenities. A trail user doesn't recognize, all right, I'm leaving this area of the trail that's maintained by Brevard County and entering the city of Titusville necessarily. They're really just wanting to enjoy a trail experience. And so we feel that developing a cohesive character for the wayfinding amenities helps improve the trail experience, as well as also just having wayfinding amenities helps improve the trail experience. It will recognize the unique character of North Brevard, which I'll get to in a little bit. Create an implementable plan through both private and public funding opportunities, which Marsha will talk about more, and consider regional trail logos and colors. So those are pretty much the main goals of this current project. So one of the biggest hurdles that we've always felt like we've had with coming together on these regional trails is there are so many colors. We have 3 different trail logos. Then you add in, the city of Titusville and the Chambers logos and Brevard County's logos and all these different logos and color schemes. And so really that's always been kind of a struggle, is what is the colors that match with everything. So this was a color study that was completed by Linda Brandt a couple years ago. And we really wanted to make sure that we were using it through the development of this plan because it was such a good starting point. So what we did is we looked at those colors and we took it into a character workshop with our regional partners. And so the city of Titusville, the Chamber, the Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge, Canal National Seashore, Space Coast Tourism, basically anyone and everyone who could be a partner along the trails. And basically we asked the question, what should the character of the trails North Brevard be? So we came up with 3 concepts or characters. We have Downtown Explorer, which is bright colors, curved flowing lines, unique shapes. Natural Adventure, which is inspired by the Indian River Lagoon. It's more rustic. It uses natural materials. It's representative of the nearby natural habitats. And then we have Space Race, which, as Eddie mentioned, that's the history of this area. And so it's inspired by the history and the people who contributed to the space program. And it's more futuristic and raw metals, perforated metals, and really very different from the other 2. And so what we did is we basically said, here's 3 characters. What do you guys think? What should the character be? And that led us into the concept development. Now, this is, as I said, this is not complete yet. It will be complete in December. This is draft. In fact, these have already been tweaked since the development of this presentation. So we then basically took all of the feedback from looking at these 3 characters where our partners had the opportunity to say, I like this about this, I don't like that about that, I hate this, etc. And we were able to then develop 2 concepts. And so then we came back to the same group and we said, what do you like and not like about these concepts? And so we were able to have that conversation again of, we like this, we don't like this, that color's terrible, you know, we need to go back to the drawing board on this. And this was with both the wayfinding as well as also amenities. Something that it was actually Marsha's idea was the idea of, we have all these amazing colors, why couldn't we use these colors to help define, and once again, this is draft, help define the different areas along the trail. And so downtown Titusville could have one color. Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge has to use either this dark blue or this gray by their federal standards. We could pop in the orange in the rural areas to represent the history of the citrus community. And so we kind of started developing further, this is kind of where we're at, is further developing the actual plan of what does this look like and where along the trail. So that kind of leads us to the next steps. So as I said, this is draft right now. We're still working it out. And so the next steps are, once again, it's being immediately incorporated into the mile markers. Later this month, we will be presenting a draft to our Bicycle Pedestrian Trails Advisory Committee. November 2021, we'll be having presentations to Titusville Community Redevelopment Agency, Titusville City Council, Maryland Wildlife Association, and North Brevard Commission on Parks and Rec. And then in December, we'll be taking this to our technical and citizen advisory committees and governing board. And so that'll kind of put a bow on the project. And so it'll be, completed and everyone will be aware of it. But then it'll really be kind of the biggest next step is going to be implementation. And so the leadership group, the next steps for that is implementate, really figure out how to implement this plan, resuming our bi-monthly meetings, and then we need to go back to the drawing board and go, all right, check. We completed this plan. What is our next big priority as a regional group? Where do we want to be when we grow up? And then our next steps at the Space Coast TPO is we want to continue the regional coordination, and we want to take kind of this almost like pilot of having this leadership group and developing this cohesive plan. And how can we apply this concept in our other planning areas, such as South Brevard has an amazing trail network and they want to grow it. And what about Central Brevard? Is us being a very long, thin county, we have all this different character as you move through the county. And we want to be sure we're representing that appropriately. So with that, I want to turn it over to Marsha to talk about kind of the future. And so this is where we are, and she's going to take us into the future. Once again, I'm Sarah Cron with the Space Coast TPO, Senior Transportation Planner. There's my contact info there. And thank you.
All right, thanks, Sarah. And now I get to share my screen. There we go. So hopefully now you're seeing my slideshow. And again, my name is Marsha Gedke. I'm the president of the Titusville Area Chamber of Commerce. I am not a planner. Since I was the last one to come in the room before they let everybody else in the room, and sent all the planners into cardiac arrest because I wasn't here super early. I've definitely lived up to my reputation there. So, but I'm here to talk about why, where we're going with this and what the motivation is as a community and certainly as a chamber for us to be involved. And so I've seen quite a few questions happening in the chat that hopefully my friends can help answer, but talking about, accessibility, et cetera, and those are all wonderful things. And we certainly did not do this process in a vacuum. And but trying to make the trail an inclusive connection point in our community is one of my goals, certainly from a visitation perspective, but also from a community perspective in building community. And that really comes into the idea of placemaking. So there we go. So the whole point of really pushing this from my perspective, or from this organization's perspective, was that there's a timeline of funding to do the infrastructure for this stuff, but there's number one, I think in the video we even said there's not money for everything that a trail needs in these plans, and there's also funding timing that has to go into it. And we've seen that as a prime example with the Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge. That segment of the trail has shifted forward and backwards and forwards and backwards based on funding, based on priorities, based on a whole bunch of different factors. And so my goal was to learn, or one of my goals was to learn from other communities and figure out how do we speed up the process. And the fastest way, in my opinion, to do that was to create a plan where people felt ownership of the trail and were willing to invest in it. So creating opportunities for private investment, corporate investment, community investment in the trail was important to me. I participated in a session with the folks from the Appalachian Trail at one point, and they were talking about vandalism and that kind of stuff. And I'll reference it a little bit when I get further in the presentation. But you know, one of the things that they said is creating ownership of the system and inviting the community to own the space somehow helps dramatically reduce your chances of damage and vandalism and those kinds of things. And they've got, you know, there's millions of examples in that. So how do we incorporate that concept into a plan? And then how do we, Sarah referenced it, this idea of placemaking. How do you create cues to the user of the trail about the place around them? So, you know, some of the important perspectives from my view of reasons why this idea of partnership and collaboration and having a plan in place makes sense for the community, because we've heard people say as we're going through this process, wow, it took us 10 years to get there, and to get where you guys are in 3 years or 4 years. And so I think part of that is trying to stay ahead of that curve so that we have the network and infrastructure in place that we can invite people to help us accelerate the process and build this out to be a better asset for our community in general. So Sarah talked about this a little bit and showed it to you, but you know, when we created this brand for Titusville, on the far left, one of the ideas was, and you saw an earlier version of the chamber logo, you saw the city logo in a couple of instances, was the idea to let people know that this is an interesting, vibrant place that, you know, is fun. You know, people think about where they want to go, and so this started as a destination marketing campaign to try to show people that there were things for them to explore in the area, and so it's very colorful, those kinds of things. So wanting to represent that in our brand as a community, and then that idea of overlaying it with the trail networks that are coming through the community was challenge number one. But then, you know, Sarah referenced it, you've got the city of Titusville, you got Brevard County, you got Fish and Wildlife, and you got the National Park Service. Every single one of them has their own standards and their own color palette. So what's not in this picture, but Sarah did a good job of mentioning and referencing, is that everybody has their own pieces that are already in place. The city of Titusville in historic downtown Titusville uses a dark green as their base color. Well, green is evident in every one of those logos that are up on the screen right now. The wildlife refuge has to use blue or gray. And so you begin to see where there are some overlaps, and that's sort of where the idea of cueing the user about the environment around the trail changing by using the color changes within the signage and amenities on the trail was an idea. But really looking at, I mean, it's crazy because your public works people are thinking about, okay, we've got vandalism on the north section of the trail, it's frequent. So how do we do something that's standard enough that we can change out a sign easily, or we can replace something inexpensively, or those kinds of things. So everybody's coming at it from different perspectives. So I don't want to sort of minimize the process that we're going through right now of just trying to get all of those people and organizations and priorities aligned to come up with something that as a community we can buy into and accept and perpetuate. Because the one thing that we don't want to have happen is we don't want to have lines where there don't have to be or shouldn't be lines, because the end user on the trail doesn't know if they're in Titusville or if they're in Mims or if they're on the wildlife refuge. We hope that through their experience on the trail they know it, but in a pleasant way, not a, oh look, the numbers just completely changed, or oh look, that's a different font, or oh, I could read those signs but I can't read these signs, that kind of a thing. And then the biggest thing was we wanted to avoid what I call sign pollution, and coming up with a cohesive system that represented everything that we needed to tell people about the trail network. So does it incorporate all the logos of all the trails that they're on, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a big task, and it's been fun doing it. I'm glad I'm not managing it. So one of the things that's been particularly special to me is this idea of play and art, and how do you incorporate that into the trail? And so I love this statement about placemaking and about why it's important. And if you think about it, artists are great communicators, and that's what they do. And so using them to communicate to people about our community, I think, is an incredible opportunity that I hope we're able to manifest in this. It also does create opportunities to bring people together. So I'm excited about that component. Yes, I'm excited about having wayfinding signage to push people to, places around the trail, or tell them where they're at, or help them, all of the great things that are inherent in a wayfinding and amenities plan, making sure that they have a repair station when they need it, or a water fountain, or a whatever. But I'm really excited about how do we incorporate that and take the vibrancy that we're trying to portray about the community through our brand and actually manifest it on the trail. So I just grabbed some examples, and I want to talk a little bit about them. Some of them are pretty standard that everybody, I think, has seen or is talking about, but I'm challenging our community to think a little bit deeper and a little bit further about how we can do this. And so this is, crosswalks and unique approaches to crosswalks. I know that FDOT doesn't like these because they're not standard colors, et cetera. We've had those long conversations, but they do create interest. I've seen places, examples of where places use color to guide children to school along their pathways, and meetup points and that kind of stuff. So, just using this idea of interest and even storytelling across the amenities plan that we put in and the infrastructure that's required for the trail. This is another popular thing. I think just so many communities now are adopting the utility box coverage, wraps and the art that's there. So I love to see that color and interest popping up in communities. But those are things that I think people are, you're starting to see as a more normal thing. There's beginning to become funding sources available for those in communities. They're dedicating funds, but what else can we do? And so we talked a little bit, I mentioned earlier about those crosswalks and placemaking, and cueing people about what there is around them to explore. And I grabbed these two examples because I think that they immediately make you recognize that there's something different about this space. And I don't know if you can immediately guess, but the one on the left is Pasadena, Tournament of the Roses parade. So their crosswalks, they're just using a stencil and actually doing that rose symbol on their crosswalks. And I just thought that was really interesting because it's a consistency issue, but it also is a storytelling issue that, impact to tell people about what they can expect or what they're proud of about their community. And then, the fish is a great one as well. It could apply to a lot of communities, but it's an interesting way to get identify a pathway and but tell people a story while you're doing it. I loved this one because now we start to interject some play into it, and that's hopscotch. So, you know, the crosswalk, it's just black and white. It's not anything unique or super colorful, but they took a creative approach to it and are stamping hopscotch into their crosswalks. And I just love that idea of inviting people to linger. Maybe they shouldn't linger in a crosswalk, but maybe at the right time they could, but or actually speed up. I don't know about you, but I'm faster at hopscotch sometimes than I am at walking, or at least I used to be. So this idea of surprises, and many of you have probably seen, maybe you haven't, but there's some great marketing videos out there of the little girl that draws the hopscotch on the sidewalk and then sits back and waits to see if people actually play. There's lots of social experiments. There's one of a ball pit. They set up a ball pit in a corner on a busy street corner and waited to see people see if people would actually get into the ball pit, and social interaction and having conversations with people outside of your comfort zone. And so just inviting people to challenge and to recognize that this is the community. It is a welcoming, inviting community, and there is fun to explore and to find. This was another one that I just really thought was interesting because it's just color, and it doesn't have to be that difficult. But I thought, imagine what that space looks like without that color there. What is, I mean, it's a great space. Don't get me wrong. It's along the river. It's, there's shade, there's sidewalks, there's other elements within it, but how fun have they made it just by adding color? So it doesn't always have to be complicated or super expensive. It can be simple, but it can transform the idea of the space. I grabbed these because I've been talking about this with our brand consultant, this idea of can you create a checkerboard, or can you create places for people to linger that are very basic, but you don't have to have the elements to play the game readily available. So when you go to Cracker Barrel, they give you the bat and the checkers. Well, on a trail or in a public space, the idea that those checkers might actually stay is pretty slim. So could you create a system where people could pick up rocks and they can play checkers with rocks or chess or those kinds of things? And then I love this one on the right because they're following the dots to dance. And it's, it's color, but it's creating relationships and communication and fun in a space that otherwise might not have been so much. Not a big fan of the sign pollution, but I love this one on the right because pointing people to important stuff and giving them the ability to know. One of the things that we hear a lot on the trail is, oh, I didn't even know that was right there. White Sands Buddhist Sanctuary is one of those things. And so how do we incorporate inviting people to come off the trail and explore other spaces that they really should know about? And then this simple one, using the signposts for a clock, I just thought was a cute one. And then I want to talk a little bit about ownership, because I do think that if you look at this fence and you look at this bench, that's art, but it's art somebody's created. And I would submit that I bet those benches don't get vandalized very heavily. And there are benches probably in other parts of this community that don't have the same treatment and don't have the same level of ownership that get vandalized. And so it's not always, it doesn't always have to be driven by the plan. Sometimes there's opportunity for individual expression. And I think you've seen some great projects along the trail over in the West Orange section of the Coast to Coast Trail, where somebody just started painting art on fence panels. And so, I think that it lends itself a lot to creating ownership, creating interest, and letting people know that this is a place where they want to stop and take a look, and cuts down on the need for replacement and hopefully maintenance and care for things like vandalism and that kind of stuff. So we're knee deep into the process, as Sarah mentioned, and I just appreciate the opportunity to be able to present. And I just challenge you guys, when you're think about how you talk about your community and tell the story of your community as you're inviting these trail systems in. So it's my story, and I'm sticking to it, guys. Thanks.
All right. Thank you so much, Marcia, for that really great presentation, really educational material there. It looks like we've got about 7 minutes for questions. So at this time, we will go ahead and open the floor for audio questions, or if you're more comfortable, you can type your questions in the chat box and we'll go and get those answered for y'all.
So I'll just mention, I just see Jenny, the QR code, give audible info on a smartphone. Yeah, so most of what the interaction, I know the city has been just completed a project on the historical walking tours in downtown. So when you're talking about the infrastructure, we definitely are taking multiple ways of telling the story and the messaging into consideration, whether that be something they can listen to, something that they can watch, something they can read, etc. So I know that accessibility is incredibly important in the plan.
So I do see a question that was put in the chat earlier. And it was asking, since trails are growing all over Florida, has there been any thought that any of y'all have maybe put into standardizing the wayfinding infrastructure across Florida, such as on-ground maps, electronic maps, signs, and pavement markings, which you did get into in your presentation?
The East Central Florida Regional Planning Council in Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council a couple of years ago did the coast to coast overlay, which was kind of providing recommendations of utilizing the logo and ways that it could be used in wayfinding. So I know that's an example of a larger regional effort. You know, I know the Sun Trail, I think I saw Robin Birdsong on here, and I know they've been doing some things in regards to trail crossings. I'm not sure that there's a full statewide program, and I'm not sure, I mean, that would certainly be larger than just a TPO. That would need to be a statewide led initiative, but you know, we would support it.
I'll just say, I think it would be a great idea. I think that going through the process of having the coast to coast trail overlay with the St. Johns River to Sea Loop Trail, which also runs along the East Central Regional Rail Trail, which also is part of the East Coast Greenway. There are a lot of recommendations, and everybody has their own ideas, but I'll use the example of the coast to coast trail. We've had long drawn out conversations about which side of the state is 1 mile marker 0 and which side of the state is mile marker 260 or whatever the number is, and what is the methodology behind those decisions that are made. And you know, I love it. I said, you know, the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, so Playland to Beach should be 0, but you know, my friends in St. Pete don't necessarily feel the same way. So I think it's a great concept, but having the perfect storm of all of these agencies trying to come up with a wayfinding plan, I don't know that it's a low-hanging fruit. Let's put it that way. It's not low-hanging fruit.
Well, then you also get into MUTCD, and you know, there are some sign recommendations, you know, made through manuals, but those are really more focused on you know, traffic control type signs. So it's that's a big chunk to bite off.
And I see this that, you know, ADA and accessibility as nationwide wayfinding requirements. I think that correct me if I'm wrong, but I just know, based on, I'm not a planner, I'm not, again, I say that, but every meeting that I go into talks about the accessibility component, and in those drawings, what Sarah didn't show of our draft plan is they were showing signage at various heights so that it was visible and accessible to various ages and ranges of ability and all of those kinds of things. So it's definitely part of the conversation, and I agree that it should have to be.
Yeah, the whole entire wayfinding plan is being developed with ADA standards kept in mind and contrast kept in mind. And yeah, I really appreciate the insight that is being provided in the comments where discussing accessibility, and obviously that's a huge factor, and we want to be sure that we're creating equitable trails.
All right, so if that is all the questions that we have for our speakers today, really appreciative for them joining us today and taking time out of their day to speak with us. And I appreciate all of you and thank all of you for coming to our first webinar in the Outdoor Florida webinar series. If you have any questions or comments, feedback, please reach out to us at the Office of Greenways and Trails at floridadep.gov. So it's going to be Office of Greenways and Trails at floridadep.gov. Also, please don't forget to fill out our post-webinar survey that we will be sending out tomorrow. We will also be sending out the link to the recording of this webinar on Friday. So at that point, you can watch it whenever you want. It'll be fully accessible, and you can share it with others who you think would really enjoy the material. We hope to see you again at one of our next webinars, our next one being Wednesday, November 10th at 10 a.m., or any of the upcoming webinars that will run once a month until October of 2022. Thank you again to everyone for joining us.